Jesus was in the desert for 40 days. He was tempted. How? Find out tonight on the ABCs of Faith, Lent edition.
Good evening. Welcome to the ABCs of Faith Lent edition, week 2. I'm Larry.
I'm Dino, and this is the show that helps you know
so you can grow.
That's right, Larry. And today we're going to be talking specifically about the temptation of Jesus. It's this 40-day period that Jesus goes through. The Lenten season is 40 days. We talked about that last week, or 46 to 47 days, depending on if you count the Sundays. The number 40, Larry, is very common in scriptures.
It is.
If we think about 40 days, we think about time periods like the 40 days of the flood, or the 40 days that Moses communes with God on Mount Sinai to receive the law. 40 years, the Israelites wandered for 40 years in the desert. So this number 40 comes up quite a bit. For Lent's purposes, we're going to be looking at the 40 days that Jesus was in the desert, that he was tempted, and kind of what that teaches us. So 3 temptations. Larry, why don't you take the first one?
Yep, I will take this. I don't know if Dino mentioned this or not, but this story or this event in Jesus' life is found in 3 of our Gospels.
Yeah. But
the detailed accounts are in Matthew's Gospel and Luke's Gospel.
Yeah, Mark, always, is like the truncated version of it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a truncated version. And in these instances, this is tied directly back to Old Testament, Moses, like you just mentioned, Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, chapter 8, very significant. First temptation was bread to stone. So Jesus is fasting. He's out there. He is hungry. He physically, he's a man, right? So this is speaking to Jesus, God, being fully man. So he's hungry. Satan is on the scene, and he says, these stones into bread. And Jesus is like, well, no, man cannot live by bread alone.
Right.
And,
but on every word that comes from the mouth of God.
Exactly. And in doing so, Jesus did not sin. So that's one of the common themes. And that's the one thing that Mark does mention is that Jesus doesn't sin as he's being tempted.
So after that first temptation, the hunger thing, Satan takes Jesus up to the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem. It explicitly states that in some of the Gospels and doesn't explicitly state that in others, but takes him to the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem. Now you have to imagine, the temple is bustling in Jerusalem. It's the seat of everything holy that's going on in Jerusalem. It's where all the Jewish people are. And so Satan takes Jesus to the pinnacle of this temple, tells him, jump off, and the Father's angels will be commanded to save you. And I think one of the interesting things here is, you think about the Jews of the day. Like, they are waiting for this Messiah.
Right.
And they're expecting something really big and momentous to happen when the Messiah comes. They're expecting like this big, huge entry. Yeah.
Right.
What would be a better entry than taking a swan dive off of the top of the temple with everyone at the temple watching it unfold, and being suspended by God's angels who are going to make sure you have a nice soft landing right in front of everyone, right?
That'd be epic.
Yeah, I mean, Satan's really digging in here to, the history of the Jewish people waiting for their Messiah, and something that might actually tempt Jesus. And the temple's a holy place, right? What could be wrong with that? So Satan is twisting all these things around.
Yeah, and it's almost like this, give the people what they want.
Yeah.
The people want this.
Absolutely.
Don't you want to give them what they want?
Right.
Because Satan's pretty crafty.
He is. And now in Psalm 91, Satan knows the scriptures too. That's where he's quoting this whole thing from, the angels will save you. So this is a big deal. We might think of, the old adage, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? But again, Satan is tempting Jesus with, give everyone what they want. Be their Messiah. It's all you have to do is jump. God's going to save you. Jesus says, no. Do not put your Lord to the test. And that's how he, once again, doesn't sin.
And I was looking at some of the church history on that temptation in particular, and they're trying to pick out, exactly where temple-wise that was. And one of the points was 180 feet up.
Yeah.
And then another point was where I think it was James, Jesus' half-brother, was, according to early church history, where he was thrown off of and actually killed. as a martyr later on. So
I was not aware of that.
Fascinating things. When you look at some of this stuff, you read extra biblical stuff and read what historians and theologians have guessed at may have happened and all, and it's all fascinating.
It wasn't going to be a little puddle jump. It was going to be something fatal.
It was legit.
And it was going to be magnificent when Jesus didn't die from that jump. So,
absolutely.
Jesus avoids that temptation, and Satan has to move on to number 3.
Yep. And number 3 is pretty fantastic and majestic as well, because apparently they go to a high place, a mountain. Quarantania is traditionally the mountain that everybody says was the mountain that Jesus was taken to.
Interesting.
It would make sense in the region. But Satan essentially shows Jesus everything.
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 Like
so
the whole world.
This is a very high vantage point. Yeah. So they're at this high vantage point, and Satan is essentially, listen, Jesus, if you will just kind of bow down and worship me, everything here is yours.
Yeah, it's bad news.
That's bad news.
But it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of temptation. And it's real temptation because
it is.
In his humanity, I mean, aren't we all tempted by stuff and power and riches and all that?
And at this point, this is where Jesus almost directly quotes Deuteronomy 6. And he says this, if I can find it. He says, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and only him shall you serve."
That's right.
It's so important, I think, at this point, before Jesus is even in public ministry, for him to be tying everything back to the Old Testament. Even though he's coming to change the rules and to shift things, he's saying, there is one true God.
Yeah.
Worship God, and I am God.
And that's the cool thing. Like, we segue from this idea of Jesus getting prepared for his ministry. Really what's happening with these 3 temptations is that Jesus' heart is being tested.
Absolutely.
And his human frailty is being tested. His will is being tested. These are very real temptations that would tempt anybody. And there's simple solutions for each one of them. Jesus can do these things. That's within his power. Yeah. But every single time, with his heart and with his will focused on God, he says, no, I'm not going to give to that temptation. I'm going to put my trust in God. And if you think about it, we talked about the Israelites, the 40 years of wandering. That was a time of their heart being tested as well.
Absolutely.
Like, they had to be prepared to go into the promised land and become the people of God.
Yeah.
So the Israelites go through this. Jesus goes through it himself. And guess what? We go through it every day of our lives, but the Lenten season reminds us that we go through that kind of heart testing, like kind of gut check to see where are we at with God, what needs to change in our lives, and what temptations are we prepared to fight against so that they don't take over our lives. So that's what these 3 temptations do for us, and that's what I think we should be thinking about during this Lenten season.
Absolutely. And then after the temptations, there were angels that came down and tended to Jesus in his weakness after the time in the desert was kind of coming to a conclusion, which is there again a direct tie back to the Old Testament and Elijah and the angels taking care of him as well. So.
And you remember when Satan said the angels will take care of you in the second temptation? The angels still took care of him.
Right.
Because he was focused on God and wasn't going to waver in that. So God needs to be in control of our lives, not sin, not temptation. That's what we focus on in the Lenten season. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We've enjoyed being here, and next week we'll be back with the next edition of the ABCs of Faith Lent edition. We're going to be talking about people.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
It's going to be very cool. And so I'm Dino.
And I'm Larry.
And we'll see you soon.
Indeed.